Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, in this video, we are going to answer an incredibly important question about the sport of arm wrestling. With all that has gone on in the world of arm wrestling in 2021, there's been a lot of people asking the question, who is the greatest arm wrestler of all time? And also, and more importantly what we'll be looking at today, who is the best arm wrestler of all time? Now let me just clarify a couple of things before we really dive into this. Make no mistake, ladies and gentlemen, the man you see on screen in action right now, John Brzenk, is and highly likely always will be the greatest arm wrestler of all time. What makes the greatest arm wrestler of all time is not just the level that they reached at any one particular moment. We're not talking about the peak of any one athlete. We're talking about the legacy. Now, John Brzenk's legacy is near untouchable. John Brzenk won his first world title when he was a teenager. He won his last world title in his 50s. And he won 550 odd titles in between. John Brzenk's legacy is truly almost unimaginably impossible to chase down. Think about it. For someone to even be in the conversation of being considered for the greatest arm wrestler of all time, they would have to win a world title in their teens. Imagine it. Can you imagine someone currently aged 18 years old beating Levan? I can't either. But that's what it would take. It would take us an 18-year-old to beat Levan right now, and for that 18-year-old to continue to beat the champions of the next 5 decades. The 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s, and even the 2020s, we saw John Brzenk at the absolute top of his game within his weight class, especially. Now, John Brzenk, as I said, he is the greatest arm wrestler of all time. There is literally no argument on that. His legacy will remain the best there is. And the other 4 gentlemen you see on the screen right now, Devin Larratt, Denis Siplankov, Andrei Pushkar, Levan Saginashvili, I assure you, they agree with me. They wholeheartedly agree with me that John Brzenk's legacy is bigger than anyone's, and not just by a little bit, but by a long, 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 long way. So let's just put that one to bed. John Brzenk, he's the greatest. No one's going to touch him in that, probably ever. So, the real question that I wanted to address in this video, and I think this question is actually something that is much more up for debate. It's who is the best arm wrestler of all time? Which arm wrestler in history peaked the highest out of any of them? If we could somehow magically transport all of these athletes to one place in time where they're all at their absolute best, who would win? Now that is a really interesting question. Let's talk first about Denis Siplankov, the man you see pulling John right now. He loses to John in the 2008 and the 2009 PAL Nemiroff Cup, or Zloty, whichever you want to call it. He's the world record strict curl holder, and his peak, arguably, was in the sort of mid 2015s through to 2018, where he was actually due to face Andrei Pushkar in a vendetta to really determine the number 1 right arm wrestler in the world at that time. Undoubtedly, Denis Siplankov, in my opinion, is the best left-hander of all time. He's actually never been defeated in the left hand. But this video, we're focusing on the right arm. This is the arm that we all ultimately care about most. Denis Siplankov, for me, when I think about his peak, it truly was enormous. We never got to see him, unfortunately, pull Andre to really determine his rank at that time. But it was in that 5-year period, sort of from 2014 through to 2018-19, Denis Siplankov really was the man, or at least potentially the man. Now, Andre Pushkar, let's talk about him. John Brzenk actually described Andre as the strongest arm wrestler of all time, in his opinion, if he's not considering himself on the list. He put Andre above everyone else that he's ever experienced. Andre was known for just coming crashing down on people. As a right arm specialist and right arm dominant athlete, Andre was truly phenomenal. Some of Andre's accolades: 14 world titles, 16 European titles, 8 absolute titles. And when I say absolute, I'm talking the Nemiroff Cup and the Zloty Cup. Andre Pushkar died when he was 33 years old. He had a lot of room to grow in his story, in his legacy. Tragically, we didn't get to see it unfold, and I don't yet think he'd reached his true potential. He was absolutely the man. Right arm, he was crushing Denis at Russian A1s. John Brzenk, even himself at the A1, said he's never felt anything like he felt in Andre that day, where John was crushed by also Andre. Andre's peak was really, really, really big. I had the honor of meeting Andre in Moldova. I watched him win that tournament there, and I watched him just simply, his presence was massive. His ability to rise and then come crashing sideways was phenomenal. And Andre, for me, is right up there in this debate. Now, let's talk about Devin. Devin is probably second of all time in terms of legacy. He's been doing this a long time, and he's been doing it very well, and is incredibly influential. Devin, of course, beat John famously in 2008 in the Arm Wars series. That was the biggest moment for him in many respects. A lot of people consider that his peak. But you know, the Devin that we've seen in 2021, in my opinion, is truly the strongest Devin Larratt we've ever seen. What he did to Michael Todd at that King of the Table event really did surprise the world. Michael Todd went into that event saying he was in the best shape he's ever been. He was declaring he was ready for Levan. And Devin Larratt absolutely pulled him apart in a way that no one has done before. Most mentionably, defeating Michael Todd and his King's move outside of the straps, which it's hard to appreciate how hard that is, but that's what happened. Interestingly, you can see on screen here John Brzenk defeating Devin in 2015. John's 53, I think, there, and yet still, look at him, he's the man. And then we have Levan. Levan truly is the monster of the sport. 170 kilos. We've never seen a professional arm wrestler as big and as strong as Levan. What he did to Dave Chafee was simply phenomenal. It's hard to imagine any one of these guys beating Levan. Even Andre, even Denis, and even Devin. It's hard to see any of those peaks being higher than Levan. But we don't know. Levan hasn't pulled any of these guys. So where do we put him? We put him high, and hopefully we'll find out. Hopefully Devin and Levan will face, and that'll give us an update to this story. Where I want to end this is back on John Brzenk. John once said to me that he believes throughout the eras that all of the champions have been amazing. Cleve Dean at 600 pounds, huge. Richard Lupke's, phenomenal. John beat them all. John beat them all. Don't forget that. Could John beat Levan? Could John beat this Devin? Could John beat the peak Andre? Look, it's hard to say no. It's really hard to say no. John always prepared as much as he needed to. Can you imagine 130, 140 kilo John had he have done that? Would have been unstoppable. So the answer to this question ultimately comes down to, I think Levan is the man right now, maybe Devin. But I would always bet that if John was in his era, in his peak, and he had these guys to face, that he would have all the tools necessary to defeat every single one of them.